Welcome to the Painter Marketing Mastermind podcast, a show created to help painting company owners build a thriving painting business that does well over $1 million in annual revenue. I'm your host, Brandon Pierpont, founder of Painter Marketing Pros and creator of the popular PCA educational series, Learn, Do, Grow, Marketing for Painters. In each episode, I'll be sharing proven tips, strategies, and processes from leading experts in the industry on how they found success in their painting business. We will be interviewing owners of the most successful painting companies in North America and learning from their experiences. In this series of the Painter Marketing Mastermind podcast, we host Todd Hess, owner of Todd A. Hess Painting Co. With over 20 years of experience in industrial, commercial, and residential painting, Todd Hess is passionate about helping homeowners and business owners transform their spaces into places they love. Todd A. Hess Painting Co. exemplifies superior preparation and premium products, helping every customer achieve excellent results. Todd and his wife, Alex, run the day-to-day operations of both businesses and place a huge emphasis on impacting their local community. From offering expert recommendations and tips to those with questions to supporting other local businesses in any way that they can, they take pride in being a part of the York, Pennsylvania community and hope to continue using their businesses to help others. If you want to ask Todd questions related to anything in this podcast episode, you can do so on our exclusive Painter Marketing Mastermind podcast forum on Facebook. Just search for Painter Marketing Mastermind podcast forum on Facebook and request to join the group, or type in the URL facebook.com/groups/Painter Marketing Mastermind. Again, that URL is facebook.com/groups/Painter Marketing Mastermind. There you can ask Todd questions directly by tagging him with your question so you can see how anything discussed here applies to your particular painting company. What's going on, Todd?
Not much. How are you?
I am good, man. I'm excited for this episode. It's going to be a little different from my other ones, but looking forward to it.
Definitely. Me too.
So tell us a little bit about Todd A. Hess Painting Co.
Well, we are, I would consider probably a relatively young company. We're only 8 years old.
Okay.
It started from a time period. I was in a local painting company that is well known, and I had moved on from that company because I was let go. And I decided that I wanted to start a company that really emphasized a lot on the employee and the customer equally, because I felt like in our industry there was a little bit of lack of really respecting or caring about the employees of a company that is in the painting industry. I started off with just me in a E250 van, and we've worked our way here the last 8 years up to $800K in revenue, and we have anywhere between 8 and 10 employees out in the field working. Currently, we are ramping our workforce up from about 7 or 8 during the winter to hopefully around, like I said, 10 or 12.
Yeah, well, that's great. And so you guys use W-2 employees or subcontractors?
We use W-2 employees. We firmly believe it's better for a company to have a good standard operating procedures and good understanding from the employee of what they need to do when they're out on a job. And I think it equates better to quality and a customer experience that's going to be superior to somebody using subcontractors. That's not saying that there isn't great subcontractors out there. We just feel that it works best with us when we have W-2 employees.
Yeah, maybe allows you to control the process a little bit more. So you were working for a well-known, more established painting company, right?
Absolutely.
And what were you doing for them?
Well, I mean, I'll just go ahead. I think it's okay. I was working for a company in York County. It was Mike Oshman Painting. I worked from there as a painter to a foreman position into a sales position. I was at the end kind of doing basically about 3/4 of the sales. I did a lot of the project management, and I would say that my title probably would have been more like a general manager.
Okay, and you started out in the field as a painter.
Absolutely. Yep.
Very cool.
Yeah, residential painting was something I learned from Jody Harlacker. He was one of the craftsmen there at Oshman Painting, and I learned a lot of what I know now of our processes and standards from him.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so you started in the field, you worked your way up. How long did it take you to get to this essentially GM position?
It was from 2005. I worked for roughly about a year and a half, and I had moved to upstate New York with my current wife, and I lived up there with her for 3 years. And I did try to run a painting business up there. And when I came back in 2009, I still was a painter. And in 2009, it took me until 2000, and I think it was the end of 2010. It's some things in business are about luck, and opportunity kind of showing up. And Mike at the time, the owner, was looking for somebody for sales, and I just happened to be a good candidate inside the company. So it took me from 2009 to 2016. About 2015 is when I started being like a GM type position. Mike still had, still made all the day to day kind of like major decisions, and he allowed me to project manage the projects that I had quoted out and sold for the company. He's a great boss. He showed me a lot of the business side. I still talk to him today. I would consider him someone that really, really gave me the insight on the business aspect of how to run a painting company.
Yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, we've had Zach on the podcast a number of times.
Absolutely.
A fair amount about Oshman painting. The That's cool. So you learned that you learned painting really well, grew in different positions. I want to ask you something, Todd. That's
Yeah,
going to seem kind of off the wall.
sure.
In 2000, you said 2005, you moved to
Yep.
upstate New York with your current wife. So you guys were not married at that time.
No, we weren't.
You were
Got married in
dating.
2007. Yep. We were
Okay.
dating. Yep.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to give you a piece of advice. Maybe you get away with it. I don't know. Maybe you do.
Uh-huh.
I said current wife one time,
Oh man.
about my wife because I wasn't married at that time, and so I didn't really
Oh
know how to say it right. So I was like, "Oh, we did this with my current wife because she wasn't the wife at the time."
yeah.
She didn't like it. So now I think now I say you did stuff with my wife, but then you have to kind of get into this, well, we were dating at the time. And it sort of sidetracks the whole story. But
Hey
anyway,
man, that's
I thought I'm not crazy. She's like, "Well, am I your
no,
current wife? Are you planning on divorcing me?" But
no, it's hey,
it's the
I will
easiest
take
way to
that
say it.
I will take that in into every decision I answer on that.
Now it's gonna mess you up. Now you're gonna be
Nah,
thinking about that.
it'll be fine. It's hey, I have a son that came from my first marriage, and maybe it's something where I have to get over the fact that my wife now brought that child up for me when I
Yeah.
was out working hard on the business. And you know what, I might get a little bit of a little bit of poke when I get home here about
You
this when
might.
she's
Not nothing like me kind of messing with your mind as we start this podcast, huh?
yeah, exactly.
I think you're up for it. Okay, so one of the things that you seem really passionate about, which I think is really neat, is community engagement, community involvement, kind of
Yes.
growing your community. Talk to me a little bit about that.
I mean, we look for every opportunity to help the community nonprofits, and I can't name them all off the top of my head, but there's multiple community nonprofits that we continue to help every year in any way we can. We're always looking for giving our services out during raffles for nonprofits and
Mm.
stuff like that. I think as we move on here, though, we really want to engage even more and be part of the networking part more, and that's only going to become possible due to the fact that we've grown to a point where we can do that. So that's a little bit of the insight on that part.
And let's talk about the personnel, right? You said personnel prior to this starting filming. You had mentioned that personnel is something you're pretty passionate about. And then as we
Sure.
started this off, you talked about how you don't think employees or team members, even if potentially subcontractors, I think this would extend to them, are not necessarily treated with the same respect or the way that they should be, because the customers may be placed on a pedestal and the team is neglected. Let's get into that.
Uh, yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, Brandon. what I saw when I first started my painting company was it's that kind of like painters were put out into a position where they went out onto the job, and this is in companies where owners aren't in the field, where they go out onto a project. A lot of projects are ran with budgeted numbers. So the lead and the painters are required to kind of bring these jobs in, and there's a lot of pressure back from the customer sometimes on, was this included, was that included, if the quote wasn't as detailed. And I experienced many a times of kind of being in between an owner and the sales process and a customer, and kind of getting the backlash of an owner if they were upset that a project wasn't coming in the budgeted hours, and there was no real communication on, sometimes, whether we like it or not, I know in our company sometimes the customer's wrong. They
Sure.
aren't always right.
Sure.
And there's times as a business owner where it's detrimental to your team to say and step in and say, hey, this is what was talked about. This is what the contract says. And we need to have uh, better movement forward on the project with the team, or maybe we're going to see ourselves have to leave the project. And I don't think that's a bad thing for an owner to display to his employees, because they are the ones on the front line most of the time, and
Sure.
and dealing with the grunt and the brunt of customers.
Sure. So this is a really interesting point. We've had some incidents in Painter Marketing Pros where I've had to step in on behalf of a team member, right? Kind of contrary to what one of our partners, we call our customers partners, maybe thought was going to happen at that time.
Yeah,
And there's nothing that really builds a team like that when they see, hey, the owner, if something's happening that probably shouldn't be happening, maybe a team member is being taken advantage of, potentially even spoken poorly to, and the owner actually has my back, right? Not just we pretend like we have your back until money's on the table, and then it's all no,
correct,
team is second for sure. Um,
correct,
that man, that really inspires, and it's a hard thing to do as an owner, as a leader. It's a very hard thing to do because you fear that. You fear being
absolutely.
confrontational with a customer. What kind of backlash might you receive from that? But I think you have this interesting vantage of having worked as a painter for a long time for a well-established company. So you've seen it in that role. Then you've gone into the estimator role. You've gone into the general manager role. Now you're in the CEO role at your own company. So you've experienced a wider gamut than most people have. So I think this is a real issue. I think it's not talked about very much. How do you handle it at your company?
Well, I am my number, and I'm available to every employee. We have Monday meetings is company meetings. I'm available to every single employee during that meeting. I don't know whether we've tested this water. I don't know whether it's good to have full company meetings and then lead or foreman meetings. We don't have lead and foreman meetings. We have meetings with everyone involved. And it gives the opportunity for everyone. If you're a painter that's only been with us for 2 weeks, or you're a foreman that's been with us for 4 years, everybody has the opportunity to talk about anything that's happened on a project. And if it's talked about, and I think it's something that I need to go to the customer, you are right. I probably have, and I kind of have never thought about the fact that if you look at owners, I don't know if every single owner has been in every single position. Kind of, I progressed in different positions, and it's not, my company isn't a company that was given to me, through family or anything like that. So I take that stuff seriously, and I'm willing to make the phone call to a customer and have a discussion, and it's a respectful conversation,
Sure.
and it's to get that. And people would be surprised, at least in our industry and in our market, lots of customers, once they're I'll say confronted, but once they have a conversation about what's going on, I think that there's probably 90% of the time the customer realizes that they kind of were either trying to get more than what was given in a quote, or they're just not used to dealing with contractors that have self-respect for them and their team. And once they see that, lots of them have become customers for the whole 8 years that we've been around. I mean, they're past customers and they're repeat customers. So, I mean, that's kind of the way I like the crew to come to me, let me know what's happening, and then be able to go to the customer and explain what we're seeing on our side.
Yeah, I agree. I think it sounds counterintuitive, right? You think if a customer is acting upset or they are upset about something and trying to push for something, that the way you make them happy is you give them whatever it is, right? Without
Yeah,
regard to whether or not it makes sense or was in the scope of work. But we have also found when you have an open dialogue and an honest dialogue and you meet as business partners, so to speak, you and that customer are at the table together, it does tend to
absolutely.
forge a stronger relationship long term.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%.
So your protocol, do you have any specific SOPs regarding this? Say, hey, a customer's leaning on your project lead or hey, here's what needs to now happen, or how does that work?
Well, I'm actually glad that you brought up SOPs because we are currently, it's kind of a part that I wanted to get into. I've noticed in the last year and a half, I kind of tried to do the owner that kind of has contact with customers and has contact with the field, but not really a lot. And we saw that we got to where we were number wise because we're really good at marketing, we're really good at sales, and we're really good at customer service. And then we realized we had to start building these standard operating procedures. So to answer your question, no, we don't currently have an SOP for that. And I'm going to actually mark that down as it should be a standard operating procedure to follow. And that may also help employees that come into meetings. Some employees don't like talking inside of meetings. I mean, that's just, and having an SOP that would be better kind of formatted for that. I'm really glad you brought that up. And actually, like I said, I'm going to make a note here about making that part of our SOPs. We currently are working out basically all of the SOPs that larger companies would have already in place. We kind of think that that's the next phase to get past that $1 million mark, is making sure that standard operating procedures are kind of followed on a day-to-day basis. So
Sure.
I appreciate you bringing that up.
Excellent. And I think standard operating procedures, that can sound so fancy, so kind of
Yep.
scary, overwhelming. So a lot of people shy away from things like that. So let's get into how you're actually creating it. How are you developing your SOPs?
So we worked on our interior SOPs during the winter, this last winter. What I did was I wrote out basically a breakdown. I just made it simple, a breakdown of a standard bedroom that we would do in a residential repaint, ceiling walls trim, and I wrote down exactly how I would have went about doing it. And then we talked in a group setting about some of the things that maybe I missed due to the fact that when you're not working every day in the field, you're kind of leaning on past understanding of what's really going on in the field. So
Sure.
we got feedback from the whole crew, and we started really narrowing it down to the point of like ceilings. Is it more efficient, and what's the outcome of the difference between brushing the ceiling line in or whizzing the ceiling line in? And is there, is one more efficient but doesn't have a good outcome, or is one more efficient and has the same outcome? We ended up with most ceilings can be a 4-inch whiz rolled the whole way around them. It's more efficient, and we didn't see any difference in the outcome of the wall cut in line. And I just say that because we had some people say that they thought there would be a difference. We didn't see any difference in that from job to job. Now, it took some of the employees time to come around to doing it that way, which there's just a slight delay in getting more efficient with that process. But now everyone does it that way. The outcome is the same. It's and I know that some painters, some painting companies, we end up kind of going back and forth with all these standard operating procedures because our processes are so important to us. And I would never tell anybody it's wrong to brush a ceiling in. Just in our company, we found out more efficient and there's no real downfall in the top cut-in line and the way it looks on a wall.
Sure. I think that concept can be applied to anything. So you're basically willing to take a look at every element of your service, and this
Absolutely.
extends obviously to sales and marketing, really any component of your business, and you're willing to test, right? So we're
Yes.
going to test on a few projects one way, test on a few projects the other way. In marketing, we call that an A/B test, and then we're going to see. We're going to measure the time. We're going to look at what the quality of the output is. We're going to probably see if there's any difference in the satisfaction of the homeowner, how the crew feels about it. And then
Yep.
ultimately, we're going to make a decision. We're going to standardize it. And that way, it's going to be efficiently run within the company.
Absolutely. And we did take the beginning of our standard operating procedure. We are looking at the fact that for some reason, using analog stuff seems to hold better with our crews. So our company manual and our standard operating procedures are all laminated and put into their vans. So it's something that they don't have to go to if a new guy comes into the company and they're doing something counterintuitive to the standard operating procedures, then the foreman or lead on the job can say, hey, this is written for us. And it's so that we don't spend a whole bunch of time when we are just doing a project talking about which way is better and which way is not better. We have time frames which we will test stuff, and we don't have any problems doing that. And we are going to change our standard operating procedure to a tactical manual instead of standard operating procedures. And I've only decided that because we found that certain painters and leads almost they almost just look at the standard operating procedures as linear. And in the industry, I think it's so hard making standard operating procedures because they're really not linear, because everything you get into, every job can be slightly different, using different colors, different coatings. And so you almost have to be adaptable to the environment you're in. So it's more like a tactical manual than it is standard operating procedure. This is what normally should happen. But if you see that in the fourth step, that it's not going to work in your current environment, we have trust in you to change it to the best of your ability. And then we're going to talk about that and why that happened. And that's going to be something that can be put in as an error-proof system for somebody else if you run into it later.
And I think that right there is a great point. And I think a lot of people don't kind of miss that, right? So you document everything and they think, well, I think there's this big hesitation to document things and write down SOPs because number one, people just think it's a lot of work more than it is. You just kind of, like you said, you imagined an interior space and you just sat down and started writing down what you're going to do. Boom, we have an SOP. Let's iterate. Let's take it to the team and then let's make it better.
Sure.
And then another thing is there's so many variations. Well, what if this? But what if that? There's just too much. You just have to know what to do, right? But what there are only so many. There's not an infinite number of variations. It might feel like it, but there's not. So you write down everything that you can think of, and then when you go out and something's not covered by the SOP, then you add it and you create another variation to the point where there's going to be next to nothing that's not already covered.
Absolutely. And inside of those standard operating procedures, you start to standardize equipment used for certain things. So then you can be more efficient on the sundry side. A lot of painting companies end up finding themselves one lead might use a Wooster FTP roller cover for all their projects, and one lead might use microfibers for their projects. So now the company's either buying them at a substantial cost at a paint store in low quantities, or they're having to store bulk so they can get a savings. We've standardized, like, this is the roller cover for the majority of what we use, and we only carry like 2 or 3 different roller covers in like 3 different or 4 different sizes. And that's just to kind of further that standard operating procedure and kind of go the extra distance with that.
At what size of a company do you think from day one a company should be thinking like that, or is it, hey, day one, just get it done at $500,000? You start thinking like that.
That's a great. I'm glad you brought it up, Brandon, because really I would tell a company the few things that I would tell them to work on at the very beginning. That you said it right. It just seems like a lot of work, but you actually have more time when you're smaller. I
true.
don't know why. I think in our industry, in many industries, it's kind of talked about like, oh, you'll always have more time when you kind of like exit the field or you have 3 employees. And I found 8 years later now, I'm like, one, I should have been working on standard operating procedures from the beginning. One thing I did do that I think helped us that I think everybody should do is write down a structure of the company. So you have an owner, you have an office manager, you have a VP of sales. I mean, let your imagination grow to like beyond what you think's possible. Like think about having like a $10 million painting company and structure it that way and start doing the mathematics by hours of like how many painters would it take to hold up a structure with an office manager and me doing sales and me doing part-time in the field. And then how does that, what's the next level with a superintendent? How many painters do I need till I can have a superintendent that can help me get materials and equipment ready and get projects started? And I think thinking about that at the beginning was a real big help for me. And we continue to change that structure still to this day.
Yeah, I think the practice of creating an org chart of where you ultimately want to be. You said a $10 million company. If that's your goal, create an org chart of a $10 million company. You're at zero or
Yep.
500,000 or a million or wherever you're at.
Wherever you're at.
Great. Take your best guess. You might not actually know exactly what a $10 million company looks like, but think about it. Write it all in. Fill out all the positions. You're going to fill a lot of those right now. But then you can
Yep.
start to create a hiring plan. You can start to understand your finances. You can start to figure out at what point you can hire what position and really create a path of growth for yourself.
Yeah, like so let's give a little bit of insight to somebody that might be starting their painting company. Don't go and do a 40-hour week over 52 weeks. That's just not we've been running numbers for 8 years, and I'm sure lots of other painting companies have been running numbers. Most painters working in the field work anywhere between 1,800 and 1,900 hours a year. You just take that 1,800 and 1,900, times it by whatever you want to charge by the hour, and now you're starting to build out a revenue. You're starting to build out one painter at a time what that revenue looks like, and just build that way. And I think it becomes a little bit easier for people to understand. Oh well, it's like you know if I'm charging $50 an hour and a painter's going to create 1,800 hours, and you start doing that. Oh, okay, well the company can be at 300,000 if I had this many painters. I think that's a great exercise for people instead of just going out and kind of like bidding a job and you think at the end, oh, well, I made $1,000. Yeah, but what was your production rate? How much did you make per hour on that job? And correlate your service industry into hours because unbillable hours make you no money. Billable hours do. And if
Sure.
you can think of it that way, it's going to help. It helps so much.
Sure. Yeah, I think setting realistic goals and then creating realistic plans and understanding the numbers and the financial metrics to get there.
Yeah,
One of the things that I've seen with a lot of less experienced painting company owners or just really business owners in general is, hey, what's your current revenue? Oh, we're at 300,000. Great. What's your goal for 12 months from now? 2.5 million. It's
yeah,
unlikely to be realistic. It might be, if you have
yeah.
a background, you're a serial entrepreneur, you're coming in boatloads of cash, you understand sales and marketing really well, you're going to lay down a system. Yeah, you could probably hit that. If you're painting because you've been painting for 15 years and you left and now you're starting that's probably not going to happen. So I think when you
Right.
map these things out, your odds of success go a lot higher because you're starting to actually think in real terms. And we're
Sure.
here to build real businesses, not imaginary ones.
I agree with you. And I think that social media has made it for entrepreneurs in every industry that it's like a 10x factor. Like you have to get to this special number real quick. We've been at 800,000 for 2 years, and we are still tweaking things, to see what's going to get us to that next step. I have no problem saying last year was the first year that was stagnant. We had years where we did 170%
But next
growth.
year you're doing 8 million.
Next year, we aren't doing 8 million. But we really what I'd like to see is next year to do 900,000, and I'd like in 2 years to do 1 million.
Yeah.
I know that's little steps.
Controlled growth.
Controlled growth. We're at controlled growth phase, and we have a lot of work to do. Like you had mentioned earlier about SOPs, and we have a lot of manuals to write. I think that it's important for everybody when you do that structured chart. What's the responsibility of the owner? What's the responsibility of the office manager? And then when you figure out what their responsibility is, write everything down they do. How do they do payroll? How do they do accounts receivable? How do they do all? Because then as an owner, if a key position like that leaves, then all of a sudden you find yourself without that office manager that you had for, let's say, 3, 4, 5 years. Well, if you have all the manuals in place, it'll be very easy to bring somebody in temporarily until you find a real replacement. And that's what we're working on right now. I don't think we did enough work. I know we didn't do enough work in that area. Me and my wife, we just talked today, and it's one of our major goals for 2024 is to get as much manuals done inside of the structure that we've built, organizational structure that we built, and as much of the standard operating procedures that we can for the company. That's our goal in 2024. A little less revenue driven and a little bit more kind of internal structure and organizational driven this year.
Sure. I think that's great. And I think one thing we've done a lot at Painter Marketing Pros is record our SOP. So we do a lot of things online, obviously.
Yeah.
So when we're doing things, we'll do a screen record, right? We'll document the steps, do a screen record, and then a team member will go write out everything that happened, actually chop that video into sub little videos, and then actually include those sub little videos in the steps. And you can do something like this, in the real world too. If you're painting, or if you're showing, hey, here's how we're going to pull up to a house, here's how we're going to knock on the door and introduce ourselves. You can film as you role play. You can then transfer this, store it on Google Drive. Would be something easy. Slice it up and then boom, put it into your manual. If you are using analog and you're using those binders that have pictures, right? Pictures with little. It sounds silly, but that's how you systematize your company.
No, that sounds really great, Brandon, because the truth of the matter is we're more visualized, stimulated society anyhow.
Yeah.
Going to pictures and to video, again, I made a note for that. And if you don't mind me asking why we're recording, so what are you using for the screenshot procedure? Are you using something like Scribe or what kind of regular? Are you just using regular?
I use
screen?
Ease US. I mean, there's tons of screen recording softwares. I just use one called Ease US, like a
Okay.
lifetime license for like $100 or something. Every time I change computers, which I've done about 10 times over the past year, I have to buy it again. So the value has gone down a little bit for me relative to the cost because they don't let me transfer it, but it's been a good
Yeah.
software.
Well, I appreciate the input.
Yeah, no worries, man. Another thing, so we've talked a lot about service fulfillment team. Another thing that I know you're proud of is your growth, right? Growth to date, and you had discussed how you differ from competitors, right? In your
Yes.
quality, but every painting company says, "Hey, we produce quality work. We use quality materials." I have yet to see a painting company's website that says we do okay work, and our materials are not the best, but they're still not the worst, right?
Sure.
So the word quality, things like that are kind of a
So,
buzzword. They kind of one ear out the other. How do you differentiate yourself in a way that makes the market pay attention to you?
well, I would say this: building your team with core values. And I've listened to some of your episodes. Uh, you let me know if we differ in this way. I think we differ just in our core values. Our core values are attention to detail, knowledge, respect, pride, and adaptable. And that all comes back to we're creating craftsmen. We're not creating painters. So we don't want painters. We want craftsmen. We want people that when they go out onto a job, I agree with you 100% that I hear quality all the time. We produce quality work. And I think you probably knowing a little bit more about video and stuff, we've noticed doesn't really matter how good of a painter you are. Pictures and video don't really show everything if you don't really zoom in and take the high resolution photos and videos. So people are getting away with saying, "Hey, we do high quality work," and you are right. It's just kind of like a buzzword. It's not really doesn't it doesn't really correlate to when you're out selling your work to people. I think we're still in a phase where we probably have to get better at videoing the actual result in high resolution and being able to show customers, the difference between something that is not quality and something that is quality, because they don't know. They don't know.
Yeah. Do you guys have to have W-2 employees in Pennsylvania?
No, no.
You
There's
don't.
there's there's places that are doing 1099 employees.
So that's a differentiator right there,
Yes,
right? Because
yes,
you can, whether or not it's true, I know some companies have done a great job with quality control in the subcontractor space, but if you can make that argument, right? You can make that pitch to homeowners. Hey, we don't sub out our work; it's ours. We quality. We train our own guys. We're very selective in who we bring on as our craftsmen, and then position yourselves to really that higher end of the market.
absolutely, absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about you taking this company, growing it from nothing, having just come up in the field and learn that way. How do you then step into your own venture and confidently take it from zero to the 800K that you're at?
Well, at the beginning, I leaned on a lot of the marketing techniques that I learned from Mike Oshman when I was with him. Uh, I hear a lot of people talk about word of mouth, and we've built a portion of our company from word of mouth. A lot of our companies have been built from marketing, and we have a marketing team, which means that we have somebody that does our PR, controls our content for us, writes templates for blogs for us so that we can put our own personal touch on it. We have a website guy that is constantly tracking our organic growth and letting us know keywords that we have to work on with videos. So I really think that the marketing part is what got us to where we're at right now. The quality and the customer service has kept customers coming back. And again, I'm coming back to this kind of sounding like a broken record. Is we're just kind of trying to figure out what takes us to over the $1 million mark. And I mean that I don't know. Can you be a little more specific in anything that you'd want to know on that venture from 0 to 800 that I could kind of go into?
No, I mean, I think that was good. I think you came in with a lot of marketing tactics you had learned, and I think that's where a lot of companies don't make a lot of headway, right? Is
Yeah,
the marketing and sales, and they just rely on the word of mouth. But when you start, you don't really have a lot of word of mouth to go around. And
yeah,
then I think when companies get bigger, I think they do have a lot of value in the word of mouth, but they don't actually actively um, harvest that value, right? They
yeah,
rely on it. Word of mouth is an active thing. It's not a passive marketing exercise.
yes. And I mean, to give somebody, I mean, what exactly we did, I know what exactly we did in the first three years. That was very helpful, and we saw it kind of decline. I don't know if that was a decline of itself, but it was every door direct mailers. We did them in high network communities. I went right into the map on USPS, found the highest network communities that I could. I started from the bigger ones, and because it was only me in a van, I didn't need to mail out uh, 25,000 of them. I only needed to mail out 2,000 of them because that's all the workload that I could afford, that I could take on at the time. And then we branched out into other communities in the first 3 years and kept kind of growing from there.
Yeah, I love it. Um, Todd, so this did you ever use subcontractors, or were you just W-2 the whole time?
W-2 the whole time.
Okay, and did you start it because you felt the quality would be higher that way? I mean, you
I,
had kind of a painter's mind going into this because the majority of your work had been painting prior to estimating and then the general manager position. So were you saying, "Hey, I want to create a W-2 workforce because I care about the painters, or because I think it's going to be better for the quality and the customer long term, or both?"
I, I think at the beginning I thought it was I think the main push was I care about the employees. I'm going to have more control over the process. Now I don't know if we want to get into this or not. I think it's something that probably people haven't been talking about. Will it become something that a W-2 employee company may be forced to go 1099 financially? That could happen. We live in a gig economy. 1099 isn't just like subcontractors. 1099 is literally in our industry a gig job. That's a gig job. It's you show up with your own insurance, you show up with your own stuff, and you do the project. The thing is, though, when you have a subcontract, you cannot force them to follow a standard operating procedure, because they're supposed to have bid out a job for them to do.
Sure.
So that's the kind of so I think it is. I cared about employees, and to be honest, I wanted control of the process when it came to how a job went and how the end result was going to be with quality and
Yeah.
customer service.
So some things I've seen in the market in terms of, I guess, forcing, while not technically forcing subcontractors to do things like wear your, branded shirts, right? Branded t-shirts. You want to show the painting
Sure.
company's name, or you follow your SOPs, would be get really good at sales and marketing. So you generate a lot of business, and then you let them know, hey, this is how you like the work conducted. This is your guidance. And if they
Sure.
choose not to follow that guidance, then the work chooses not to be directed their way. Right. So
Perfect.
it's not, hey, you have to do it this way. This is your project. Do it however you want. I'm
Yeah.
gonna let you know this is how we prefer you do it. And you're probably gonna get a lot more business if you do it the way that we prefer that you do
Sure.
it. Right. It's
Sure.
a little, it's
And
like a little bit mafia like, but I think it
yeah,
works.
I'll pick your brain here. So, because you've talked to lots of different companies, I'm sure you've talked to lots of 1099 only
Yeah.
painting companies. And so, what is their biggest, like? How do they control quality wise when having to deal with, let's say you have an upset customer and the project goes sideways? Do those same companies still have W-2 employees to deal with the customer service issue, or do they have to correct it through the same subcontractor or have another subcontractor come in and correct it? I've
You
always
would
been interested.
Sure. No, you would
Interested.
typically want to, once you get to a certain scale, project manager, that is a W-2 that's on your
Mm-hmm.
staff that could go out and handle things like that. You'd want the
Okay.
estimator to be on your team, obviously.
Yeah.
And then the subcontractors really go in and do the work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then ideally you would set up the projects such that the subcontractors are obviously being paid a percentage of that project. And if they have to come back um, and do touch ups and whatnot, then they uh, ultimately that eats into their profit margin because you're not paying them anymore. And so the idea is you create a machine which is spinning on off enough work that the quality subcontractors are going to want to consistently work with you, and then you can sort of control the quality because the right. I mean, it's like a company finding the right employees, right?
Yeah.
The right employees want to work for the right company. So the right
Sure.
subcontractors are going to want to work for the right painting company that provides them consistent work, that treats them well, that pays them fairly, but it's also going to have certain guidelines that the subcontractors are going to have to abide by.
That's sometimes, Brandon, you just have to have. You kind of get stuck in your own little like area of what you're doing and how you're doing it as an owner. I mean, this is going to be a great episode for me to listen back to, just because I don't know. I feel like maybe 1099 and W-2 companies are kind of they're always like either one or the other, and they're very strongly W-2, or they're just like, yeah, we just use nothing but 1099s. And I think it might help our industry in our area. I have lots of 1099 subcontractors. They ask us all the time if we sub out work.
Yeah.
And I've always said no because we have W-2 employees. I don't By talking with you, I'm not really sure if that's completely a fair answer because we've never tried it before.
I
You
think
know?
the most flexible option is a primarily 1099 model with, depending on the size of your company, maybe one W-2 crew or two W-2 crews that can go in and assist as needed. And you can tell them exactly what to do.
Yeah. And it's funny that you say that because you're actually pinpointing exactly the easiest amount of employees to get to. It's always two or three crews. Like a company of like 4 to 6 guys, which would be, two crews of two crews or three crews. That's like the sweet spot where nothing really ever goes wrong. Like you got a core, like I have
Core
a
team.
core 7 guys that I feel like they'll be there for as long as they decide, unless they want to leave, they'll be there, right?
Yeah.
And it's always getting to that 10 guys. And I've heard other W-2 companies, they might be 40 or 45 years old and they're at 15 guys, but you'll hear them year after year talk about getting to 20 or 22, and it might only ever be a gain of one guy or a gain of two guys, but you might lose a guy. So that's getting my mind really thinking about that model that you just mentioned, because it would be, for me to do that right now would literally just be keeping the guys I currently have, selling more work and offering it to subcontractors. None of my guys would ever go without work. None of my guys would ever, they wouldn't it wouldn't affect them at all. It would just be a matter of, we brought in more work, we sold more work. The guys that are W-2 are getting paid to be W-2, and the guys that are 1099 are being 1099. And it's going to lower insurance costs. It's going to lower a whole bunch of stuff on the bottom end.
Todd, we'll have you come back and film a second episode in a year. You'll be at 1.5 million. It'll be like, things are great. And then we'll trace it back to this podcast. And then I'll ask for my commission from it.
Hold on. This is a real contract. What's your commission?
Just 10% of whatever the net increases. That's
10% of the
revenue increase. Yeah. But if you go backwards, that's on you.
You're not paying me.
I'm not paying. No.
Okay.
Todd, this has been awesome. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you want to touch on?
Just reiterating for everybody, that's starting their own company, map out your organization, understand your numbers, build your team, build your crew, keep a good culture, make core values, and stick to those core values when you're deciding things inside your company. That's all.
Todd, I appreciate you, brother. Congratulations on your success, and thank you for your time, man.
Thanks so much for having me on, Brandon. I appreciate it.
If you want to learn more about the topics we discussed in this podcast and how you can use them to grow your painting business, visit paintermarketingpros.com/podcast for free training, as well as the ability to schedule a personalized strategy session for your painting company. Again, that URL is paintermarketingpros.com/podcast. Hey there, painting company owners. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Give us your feedback. Let us know how we did. And also, if you're interested in taking your painting business to the next level, make sure you visit the Painter Marketing Pros website at paintermarketingpros.com to learn more about our services. You can also reach out to me directly by emailing me at brandon@paintermarketingpros.com, and I can give you personalized advice on growing your painting business. Until next time, keep growing.